Hello and welcome back to 7 Days of Halloween. Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome to day 2 of 7 Days of Halloween. Today we're going to be working with one of the new Tim Holtz products that was released this Halloween season, and this is the poison tissue paper. Now, this isn't the first time that he's introduced the tissue paper product, but it is the first time that he did use one of his Halloween designs. And of course, he picked one of the best ones, the poison labels. He's introduced the poison labels on his paper stacks before, as well as some washi tape. But now we actually have it in a new form, which is the tissue paper. And if you've never used the tissue paper before, you're going to love it. We're also going to be working with one of the Bigz dyes, which is the poison bottles. And these are going to go great with the tissue paper. And I'm going to show you how to transform these bottles into a really creepy poison bottle using the Crackle accent medium. And we're also going to be using one of the new sticker books that Tim released for Halloween. And this is called Curiosity. Now, I've used some of his other sticker books before, but this one is great because it really is eclectic. It not only has images that you can use, but it also has those snippets that are from books, and they work great for your Halloween projects. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing you're going to need, of course, is a white piece of paper. And I started out with a cardstock that I think I cut down to about 5 by 7. Now, I'm going to be using a die cut to trim it down. So just keep in mind you want it a little bit bigger than a die if you're going to be using a die for your final layout. Now, the tissue paper pretty much has the same texture as paper that you would put in a gift bag. It has that thinness and it's really easy to tear. So I wanted my poison labels to have somewhat of a jagged edge. So I went ahead and I just ripped my tissue paper to get it ready to adhere to my cardstock. Now, the Mod Podge is pretty good. There's a couple other mediums out there that you could probably use as well. Tim Holtz has some Collage medium that would work great. Any type of collaging medium would work fine for this type of technique. I have a really big bottle of Mod Podge, as you can see, so that's what I decided to use. So once I got my Mod Podge adhered to my white cardstock, then I just went ahead and I added my tissue paper to the paper. Now keep in mind that when that Mod Podge dries, it will work as a resist a little bit if you want to add another medium. So you just want to make sure that you try to get the Mod Podge directly under what you're going to be adhering to your cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of place my paper down, and then I'm going to take some more of that Mod Podge and I'm going to finish off adding some adhesive underneath it and then also on top of it. So not only are you going to use the Mod Podge as an adhesive underneath, you're going to use it as a sealant on top as well. But be careful, you don't want to put too much Mod Podge. If you do put too much, then your paper will get all wrinkly. And it could get a little bit too moist, so you just want to be aware of that. So make sure that when you are working with your paintbrush that you are smoothing down your adhesive really nice and smooth. You don't want it to be too bubbly. You don't want to have it too wet. Just nice smooth strokes. You could even use a brayer if you have a brayer in your tools to help roll down the paper to make it nice and flat. You just want to make sure again that it's just really flat. You don't have any bubbles underneath it. All right, so once I had my tissue paper adhered to my cardstock, then I wanted to go ahead and dry it. Now, there's a couple of ways that you could dry your paper. Of course, you could just let it air dry, which is completely fine. But because I am doing the video, I am going to go ahead and use my heating tool to help it dry along. And it doesn't take too long at all. I just had my heating tool on for less than a couple of minutes, and I was able to get the paper completely dry to move on to the next step. Okay, so once my paper was dry, I did want to go ahead and run it through my Big Shot to cut a stitch rectangular piece. And that is what we're looking at right now. So once I had my piece cut out, I went ahead and I got some of this gel medium to add some brown tones to the background. Now this gel medium is nice. I've used it on some other videos before, and it's really thin, but it really gives you some nice brown tones. A couple other mediums you could probably use. Of course, you can get any of your distress inks. Some of your oxides, of course, would work well. And then if you do want to use some of the paints, you just probably want to dilute it a bit. You don't want it to be too dark because then it might look kind of odd next to your labels, but just enough where you're going to have some brown tones to make it look vintage. And then as you can see, I am using my rag to move some of the color around. And clean up as well. I always have a rag next to my workstation just for this purpose, not only to use on my projects, but to help keep things tidy as well. So once I had exactly the background that I was happy with, and I went ahead and I got out my heating tool once again, just to give it another quick dry before I moved on to the next step. Okay, so when I make my handmade cards, I like my cards to be nice and sturdy. So the way that I get this obviously is to layer. So I'm going to go ahead and layer this background onto some brown cardstock, and then I'm going to layer it again onto some black cardstock. Like I said, I don't like my cards to be flimsy. I like them to have some sturdiness to them, especially when I'm adding things on top of them. I don't want my cards to fall over. So I just took some brown cardstock and I trimmed it down. And typically my rule of thumb for my layers is about 1/2 inch. But for this card, I went ahead and I just trimmed it pretty close to my finished collage because, again, I am going to use a couple of layers and I didn't want my card to be too big. I was going to go for a 5x7. So my first layer was really close to my collage card, and then my second layer will be 1/2 inch less than my 5x7 card, if that makes sense. All right, so now that I have my first layer done, we're going to go ahead and add the black cardstock that I was talking about just a few minutes ago. But when I went to add my black cardstock, I noticed that the bottom and the top portion were a little bit bigger than the sides. So I didn't want too much black showing, and that's when I decided to bring in some of my washi tape. The washi tape that I'm using does have brown tones in it, and I thought it would match the card a little bit better than having too much black show on the top. And this is another trick with your washi tape. If you have some layers and maybe the colors are just a little bit too dark, or maybe they're just not matching up exactly the way that you want them to, you can easily add some washi tape to add a little bit more interest and maybe a little bit more contrast to your cards. And that washi tape seemed to do the trick. I was pretty happy with the way that it matched up against the collage card, and I thought it looked a lot better than just having the black on the top and the bottom. All right, so now that I was happy that my bottom layer matched my other layers, I went ahead and I got my adhesive and I adhered it to the bottom layer, and then I was ready to go ahead and start adding some of my embellishments. All right, so one of the other items that I picked up this season was the paper dolls from Tim Holtz. And every season I buy the new pack of paper dolls, even though I may have several from the prior season. I love getting the holiday packs because they have some great characters that you can work with. And even though I had some of my characters left over, like I said, from last season, I did go ahead and pick up the new pack because he is introducing some new characters. Now, one thing that I noticed on this year's pack is there are several new characters that are couples. And when I say couples, it's two people in the actual picture. So, of course, the witches are a tradition, and they come in every pack that I've noticed over the last couple of years. But he does have a couple of new characters here, and brothers and sisters, they have matching shirts, and those are always really cute. And there were a lot of ways that I could go with this card, but I ended up just going with the witches. But I did want to share with you some of the other characters in this pack because there really are some good ones. All right, and like I said, I did ultimately decide to work with the witches. But before we add those to the card, we're going to go ahead and transform that bottle that I cut out earlier. And the way that we're going to do that is with some distress inks as well as that Crackle accent that I shared with you earlier. Now, the die set has 3 sizes, but I did end up going with the smaller bottle, and it just seemed to be a little bit more proportion with the witches. But you could definitely do this with any of the 3 bottles, the technique that I'm going to show you right now. So once I finally decided on the size of the bottle, then I went ahead and I got out my distress ink. And the color that I'm going to be working with for my bottle is the walnut stain. And this is a really easy technique. All I needed to do was just get my dauber, and then I added the distress ink right to the bottle. And I was really generous with it. I wanted it to be really dark because I was going to be adding some of that glossy accent over it. I wanted to make sure that the color came through really nicely. So once I had the bottle completely colored, then I went ahead and I started adding my glossy accent. Now, the trick to the glossy accent is to get not too much and not too little, if that makes sense. You don't want it to the point where it's oozing off of the side, but you do want it where it does have a little bit of a layer, because that's what's going to create the glossiness of the bottle and make it look like a real bottle. And if you want to, you could use some sort of a tool to just kind of move the glossy accent around, but you don't want to make it too thin. You do want to have a little bit of a layer. I'm just using this straight edge paintbrush here to move it around, just to make sure that it's completely covered. Now, once you have your bottle covered, you are going to probably need to let it sit overnight because it is pretty moist, and you want to let that glossy accent do its trick as far as the crackle. So just for videotaping's sake, I did go ahead and I created one last night, and this is the result of the finished bottle. Now, as far as the cap, the way that I colored up the cap is I used one of my distress crayons, and the color that I'm using is my antique linen. And I was generous with adding the crayon to that. And then once I had that color on my cap, I went ahead and took that same dauber that I used for my bottle to color up the edges. And then when you go to adhere your bottle to your cardstock, you want your cap to be underneath the bottle. So unless you know exactly where your bottle is going to be positioned, you may want to take just a little bit of adhesive or a little bit of tape and adhere that top of the bottle, the cork essentially, to your bottle, so that way it just is one piece rather than two separate pieces. And then I'm coming in again with the Redline tape to adhere the bottle to the cardstock. Now, the Redline tape, like I said, is really strong, and it is a little bit difficult to pull up. So that's why I typically have some sort of a pointer or a pick to help me pull some of that top adhesive cover off of my tape. You can easily try it with your nails, but you're going to have a little bit of trouble, I'm sure. So if you have some sort of a tool or a pick when you are using the Redline tape, it just makes life a lot easier. All right, so now that I have my cork attached, again, I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more of that Redline to the backing so I can go ahead and adhere it to my cardstock. And again, like I said, I'm coming in with that pick to lift up the back to be able to expose the adhesive to adhere it to my card. And then the bottle is a little bit thick. Like I said, I did use some of my grunge board to cut the bottle. So there is a little bit of lift to it. So I'm going to add some of my white foam tape to the back of my witches to give my witches just a little bit of lift. So once I had my witches in place, then I just wanted to kind of finish up with a few more embellishments. Now, the color coordination on the card obviously is the orange and the black. And what's really nice about Tim's sticker collection is a lot of the pieces that he has in that collection are orange and black. So they match perfectly with the tissue paper. His bugs are orange and black, and some of the other labels are more of a tan, and it really worked well with this card. So I was able to add some really nice embellishments to the card, and I'll be showing you that as soon as I get my witch adhered to my card. So the first thing that I wanted to do is to go ahead and find some sort of a label for that bottle. And the sticker collection has some great labels that you could choose from. I went ahead and ended up using the round beige label, but there are some white labels in there. So there's a lot of choices as far as an apothecary theme. There's also some actual labels in there, like you have your poison label and you have your arsenic label. So you could easily continue on with the poison label theme on your card and add some of those stickers. But I decided to just go ahead and use the label for the bottle, and then I'm going to add a couple of those bugs for embellishments. So I finished adding my bugs, and then it was time to figure out my sentiment. And there was a couple of ways I could have gone with this. I could have used one of the sentiments here with the stickers, but I did decide ultimately to use one of the chipboards because I really like the way those sentiments stand out. And as I was able to find a really great one to go with these witches. Now, the word chips that I'm going to be sharing with you here in just a moment are really probably another favorite of mine. And I like the word chips because it really is a good price and a good amount for the price that you're paying for these word chips. I mean, you get a whole bag of different sentiments, and these are really nice, thick word chips that hold up really nicely. So not only can you use them on your cards, but you can use them on your mixed media projects as well. And like I said, you get lots of different sentiments. So it goes a long way. This is another collection that I have leftovers from every season, and I just keep adding to it because I know I'll use it throughout the year. And you can't always get the holiday ones out of season. So it's really nice to be able to stock up and have some of the extra holiday ones in your stash. Now, as you can see, the sentiment I ended up going with says, "She casts a wicked spell." And of course, that just worked perfect for the witches. And once I added the sentiment and one more piece of embellishment, my card was pretty much finished. All I needed to do was to add it to my white cardstock. So I hope you've enjoyed my second card in my 7 days of Halloween. The last two cards, we haven't done any stamping. So tomorrow we'll go ahead and we'll create a card using some of our rubber stamps. So as always, I'll leave a list of all the products that I've used to create the card along with the links to the stores. And if you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up. Now, I've shared with you a couple of new products that I picked up this holiday season. So my question to you for my comments is, have you picked up any new product to create some of your Halloween cards? And if so, let me know what product you've picked up. And of course, I'll be able to use your comment as your entry to my giveaway for my 7 Days of Halloween series. Now, don't forget, you also need to be a subscriber to be entered into the giveaway. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again tomorrow.